Hello, everyone. For everyone who's here, thank you for coming. Just give me a minute. This is Aaron Friends, and give me a minute to uh, just review a few things. Very good. All right, folks. I think that the time is now 7:04. Thank you for your patience. We are trying to. This is my first virtual meeting, so I imagine there may be some software glitches as we go forward. The way I've got this set up, the way we're set up now is that the attendees to the meeting are muted. The Counselor Ballantyne, myself, Jill Lathan, and our consultants from Warner Larson will be able to speak. There will be two halves to the presentation. The first half of the presentation will talk about the Dilboy Stadium. The second half will talk about the auxiliary fields. But before we get started, I actually would like to go through a couple of things just for the record. So we are recording this meeting, and we'll make it available on the website afterwards. So for the record, just wanted to state that this is Aaron Franz. I'm the project manager with the Department of Public Space and Urban Forestry, and we are starting the meeting now. The time is 7:06. This is Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. And this is a public meeting to review the plans that the city has developed for 1, the replacement of the Dilboy synthetic turf field, and 2, the improvements to address public safety issues, stormwater runoff, and the playability of the natural grass Dilboy auxiliary fields. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15, 2020. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. I just want to say thank you again for attending. I know this is not our typical meeting. I suspect that many of you may have experience with other virtual meetings. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Warner Larson Architects in just a minute. But first, I'd like to take a minute to say thank you to Counselor Ballantyne for Ward 7 for her support of the Dilboy projects. And I believe that Counselor Mba had also signed into the meeting, so I wanted to express thanks to him, although it looks like Will has not signed in yet. I also wanted to say thank you to the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. They are the property owner of Dilboy Fields and are our partner on this project. We are making provide the construction specifications and the changes, but everything is done with their approval. There's a process by which they are approving the plans. And I also wanted to say thank you. Jill Lathan is here. Jill Lathan and her staff have worked very hard to move this project forward. The Dilboy Fields are a critical recreation resource in the city. And I think that these days, more than ever, it's so critically important that the kids in the city are able to get outside and participate in recreation, and these fields are going to play a vital role in that. As I said, this is my first time hosting a virtual meeting, and I suspect there may be some technical glitches along the way. So, if you'll give me a little, show me a little patience, that would be great. I'm sure we'll be able to figure them out as we go ahead. Hold on just a quick second. As a matter of procedure, as I said before, the attendees to the meeting are muted, but if you look at your screen in the top right corner, there's the control panel. You should see that. the bottom of the control panel is a caret for chat. So what I'd like to do is to use the chat option so that people can put their questions in. So if you have something a question you'd like to have, or there's some issue you'd like to address, please put it in the chat. We'll then take a break after the first portion of the meeting to answer any questions related to the stadium, and then we'll address additional questions at the end of the meeting. All right. But if for any reason there's any difficulty in this process, that people don't feel like they were heard or weren't recognized in some way, please email me. My email you'll be able, I think many people have my email, it's on the flyer. So send me an email, I'll have a response for you in the next day or two. Thank you. Councillor Ballantyne, before we get started, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Arn. I just want to say thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. I'm excited to hear what our architects have got to share with us. And I also wanted to recognize that Senator Pat Jalen is also in the audience this evening. So I thank her for being engaged and supporting us over here in Ward 7. And I will be here throughout the entire meeting. If you have any questions or want to do follow-up, I'm here for you, and you can reach me after the meeting or during the meeting if you like. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you much. And Senator Jalen, welcome to the meeting, and everybody else as well. Thank you again. I'm going to turn the presentation over to David Warner and Josh Malong of Warner Larson Associates in just a minute. But I just wanted to, before we do that, I just wanted to point out just a few more facts. I mean, we see this as a real opportunity. We know that the turf field at the stadium is worn beyond safe playability. It has been for a number of years, and so we're really happy that we have this opportunity to make the improvements. I think that the DCR built the stadium. The DCR also built the auxiliary fields. They did a good job at the time that they were constructed. But we've seen problems at both spaces, and one of the things, the purpose of these renovations is to make the improvements that will make both of these fields safe for recreation play and safe for the community. At the same time, we recognize that these fields are both abutting the Alewife Brook resource area, and it's imperative that we provide strong protections for that area as well. And we have done so with these plans. So just wanted to make sure people were aware of that. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to David Warner.
Excuse me, Arn, could I just chime in? There might be, if you might want to check on the feature that automatically lets people into the meeting, because it appears that Louisa is in the waiting room waiting to be allowed into this meeting.
Oh, thank you very much.
Or if you can't find that feature, that maybe every couple of minutes you check to make sure you're letting people in. Thank you.
Yeah, I will look for it. Thank you very much. David, I'm going to make you a presenter now, I believe.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, Arn. Let me just get this slideshow up, and we'll keep on moving because I understand, we've got time frame here till 8 o'clock. And let's see. Here we go. There we are. All right, so everybody can see the screen, correct? Great. Well, we're very pleased to be working with the City of Somerville on this project. My name is David Warner, and Josh Malonig is the project manager who's working on this project. And Jill Lathan is the Director of Parks and Recreation. I know, Arn, you've already made all the introductions. I don't know if you mentioned Ben Waldrop, Director of Operations. He's also on the call. So we've got everybody here to be able to answer any questions that might come up. And as Arn said, we're going to first talk about the Dilboy Stadium, which is currently in the notice of intent process with the Conservation Commission. And it's also being reviewed by DCR. We're about ready to complete that process. And what we're presenting to you are the final designs. We'll show you the existing conditions of the fields, and then explain the field design, talk about the materials, and end with the schedule before we start taking questions. But please do put any questions that you might have along the way into the chat box, and we'll take those into consideration when we're answering those questions. As far as the existing conditions are concerned, the synthetic turf surface, as Arn said, is really badly worn out. Let's see, I just lost my screen for a second there. Can you still see my screen, or do you see the? Okay.
No, I've got it.
Apologize for this technical. Okay. For whatever reason, when I clicked on the GoToWebinar to get that out of my view, the PowerPoint disappeared. And let me see if I can minimize the screen. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. The running track is also very, it's in good condition, but it needs to be resurfaced and restriped. There are definitely safety concerns with the synthetic turf surface, and also there's a slope between the stadium bleachers and the track that has an erosion issue that we're looking to also remedy as part of this project. So this is an aerial view of the site, and most people on this call are probably quite familiar with it at eye level. But this aerial view helps us point out a few of the key adjacencies: the parking lot to the north, the main parkway to the east, and then the Alewife Brook to the west, and then the pool and the auxiliary fields, which we'll talk about in the second half of the presentation, to the south. The synthetic turf area is very clearly shown here in green, and the tan and the red areas are the rubber surfacing that will be resurfaced as part of this project. That slope condition I was talking about is this strip here between the bleachers and the track. Down at eye level, this gives you a close-up view, for those of you who haven't been into the park recently, of the conditions of the turf and the track, as well as the edger in between them, the trench drain. The turf is very worn out. It served its useful life several years ago, and it is time for replacement. It was originally installed as a chrome rubber infill and sand with a polyethylene fiber synthetic turf. And it has a trench drain around the perimeter, which is the cover on that tends to expand and pop off in high temperatures. We'll be remedying that as part of this project. You can see how the surface of the rubber track has been worn, and the resurfacing will restore that to good condition. And then the slope here with the shrubs and the mulch actually wears down and comes down onto the track surface. So we're looking at a permanent solution that will deter people from walking up and down the slope, and then also to contain the base of the slope. This is the plan that we put together. It includes a field survey that's been performed, and we've also referenced all of the existing as-built conditions from the original construction. And we've highlighted in here the limit of work line that goes around the perimeter of where the work will be performed. That's that dark outline. And we also have color-coded this plan with the areas that are of jurisdiction to the Conservation Commission under the Wetlands Protection Act. So this is the 100-foot buffer zone off of the wetland that's been delineated as part of this project. That's a recent wetland delineation by our wetland scientists, and then it's been surveyed in the field. There is no work being proposed within the 25-foot riverfront area here, and everything inside of this limit of work line, with the exception of some work adjacent to this slope, is really not disturbing any soil whatsoever. Resurfacing the rubber track is being done in place. The synthetic turf carpet being removed and replaced is also not a disturbance to the ground. So I wanted to show you the composition of the synthetic turf system that's being proposed. Like I said, the original field was built with the polyethylene fiber, and you can see here in this profile how the synthetic turf is still designed with a polyethylene fiber. And it's a dual fiber material, and that's really for sports performance. The infill material that we're proposing, that we're specifying for this project, is a plant-based infill and in combination with sand. The reason why, and some of you may be aware, when we originally submitted to the Conservation Commission, the proposed design was to use crumb rubber, is the fact that that material has been widely used, and in fact is still widely used on most synthetic turf fields, and has very high performance from a sports perspective. In the review with DCR, they made it very clear to us that the projects that they're doing within proximity to resource areas, like they just did a project out in Worcester, they're using organic-based or plant-based infill materials. And what we're specifying for this project as a result of their recommendation is the same infill that's been installed at the Capuano field in the East Somerville Community School. It's a wood product. It's naturally derived from trees that are grown in the United States, in Georgia actually, and it has similar performance characteristics of granular infills like crumb rubber. So the shock pad is the other important component to this. The current field does not have a shock pad underneath the synthetic turf, and this component is important for providing uniform safety for the athletes across the field surface over the life of the synthetic turf system. So as far as other materials and the existing conditions and what we're proposing to do to remedy them, we wanted to point out three things here that are significant improvements over the original design. The original design has a trench drain system, like you saw in one of those pictures. That also has catch basins with pipes that go directly out into a manhole structure. What we're going to be doing is inserting these screen mesh filters into each one of those catch basins to capture any of the particulate that would be coming off this field. And part of the maintenance of this facility will be to periodically, once or twice per year, with those screens get emptied and that material gets disposed of properly. This is a photograph inside of the existing outlet structure that drains out to the Alewife Brook. And what it shows actually is this is called a duckbill, and this is the outlet. This is the inlet from the field. What that does is it makes sure that any of the water that comes into this from the field, from the river when it's in flood stage, does not come back in and surcharge underneath the field. It's a very good design from a backflow prevention standpoint. And the sumps within these drainage structures will also be cleaned out on an annual basis to make sure that no sediments and no particulates will make it out into the river. And then as far as the resurfacing of the track, you can see in this little inset photo that it's a layered system. And what we're talking about doing is just putting on a new wearing layer on top of the existing track that's there, and then restriping the lane markings. And lastly, we wanted to summarize the schedule as far as the stadium is concerned. We're in the process of, like I said, of getting the permit, the notice of intent, order of conditions with the Conservation Commission, and that will be completed this fall. And we're looking to bid this project during the winter, which is going to be a very favorable time of year to get best pricing from contractors so that we can start construction when the weather turns favorable in the spring of 2021. And during that time, the field will be closed to the public, but it could be reopened by Memorial Day or early June. And the schedule is something that is being updated as we go, because there are some moving parts here relative to this, which one of those steps after we get approval from the Conservation Commission will be going to City Council to finalize the funding. So at this point, we want to take questions, and I think the first thing we were going to do was look at any comments that have come through in the chat. And then also, as part of this, Arn, I don't know if you want to invite people, they could raise their hand, and we could see under attendees, anybody who raises their hand, and selectively unmute somebody who wants to speak. So one question came that says, are you keeping the backflow preventer in place? Yes, we are. It's fully functional. It's in good condition. There's absolutely no reason to modify that or change it. It meets current standards as far as making sure that we don't get the surcharging from floodwaters coming up underneath the field and compromising the field performance. And are there any other questions that people want to enter?
There's a few more questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to read them? I'm not sure I can see them. Scrolling down under the chat window.
There's a question about, is the Dilboy Stadium field continue to be used as a high school graduation venue? Having chairs, high heels, tables, etc. avoids warranties on synthetic turf. My concern is that continuing this practice would not only void the warranty, but degrade the field more quickly. If I had misunderstood where the ceremony takes place, my apologies. That's from Tori Antonio.
Jill, do you want to answer that? Oh, you're muted.
Jill should be not.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
Can you
thank
unmute me?
you.
Yes.
So typically for graduation, if that becomes an issue, then the company that installs the staging can put some platforms down for students to walk from their chairs to the stadium, should we have graduation in the stadium next, in the future.
Josh, do you see any other questions in the chat window? With regard to the warranty, we will make sure that this manufacturer provides a very detailed operation and maintenance plan that the city can abide by to ensure that there's not going to be a compromise in the warranty. That doesn't preclude certain events, but there are protective measures that need to be implemented in order to make sure that it doesn't damage the turf.
Josh, hi, it's Arn. I believe you were looking at the questions, not the chat, which is where I see Tori's question. There are two more questions there. Do you see those? I can read. The first one is from Julie Wormser. Says, more of a comment than a question. Super happy with your decision to use plant-based sand crumb for the artificial turf. Following that, there's question from Renee Scott. Says, I've read about barriers that prevent movement off the field.
Renee also had another question about in a flood condition, would the screen system be able to handle the infill moving off of the field?
Yeah, so the migration of infill off the field is not going to be something that occurs due to environmental factors. It gets tracked off by users on their feet if there's some dampness on the field, particularly with this plant-based infill material. And the dual fiber, those two things work together to hold the infill in place. What small quantities of particulate would come off of the field over the life of the field through normal use will easily be trapped within those screens. So there wouldn't be a problem in terms of impeding flow, if that, I think, is the crux of the question.
I think that's right. I think that one of the things we were trying to do is just to, when we had looked at the drains, we weren't seeing any signs of particulates accumulating in the drains or going through the system. But we want to be sure that we're making the improvements that we need to for the new field. And so, as David pointed out, there is the drainage on both sides of the field. Those drains don't currently have a screen system inside them. So that's one of the things that we'll be including. Yes,
Okay.
just sorry, going back to a technical question, we touched on this earlier, but I just want to make sure that if anybody has their hand raised, that we're aware of it. And I'm trying to find.
So under attendees, there's a column with a hand. I don't see any hands raised. Scrolling up and down just to make sure. No.
All right, very good.
Oh, there is one. Tori. I'll unmute her, okay?
Sure, yes, go ahead.
I don't know if I can. Oh, Tori, I think you're self-muted. That's the notice I'm getting. If you want to unmute your microphone. Not sure how to do that, Arn.
Now I'm looking at, let me just go to.
I'm getting a pop-up
All right,
that
hold
says
on.
attendee is self-muted and is muted by an organizer. So I
There
think
I
the
am.
organizer needs.
Right,
Oh,
Tori,
there
you
you go.
should be able to speak.
Do you hear me?
Yes, very good. We've got
Hi,
you.
everybody. Thanks for hosting this meeting. My question was on the surrounding vegetation. I think at the Conservation Commission meeting, there was talk about mowing some of it back, like increasing the space between the, increasing more perhaps like grassy areas. And I was also wondering if there's any plans to do any invasive plant removals. You know, if this is an opportunity to do that, to take some out, to because you know this is the Alewife Brook, and we do need to eventually restore its natural vegetation so that it's functioning, you know, as a system and as it should. So I guess, yeah, is that in the plan, and can we make it part of the plan? Thanks, guys. Good job.
Okay, thank you. Arn, I'm happy to answer that if you'd like.
Sure, let me just jump in. Tori, I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So there are two parts to this project. There is the initial piece, which is the synthetic turf field inside the stadium, which is clearly contained inside the stadium. And then there is the second phase of the project, which is the improvements to the Dilboy auxiliary fields. So I think that the Concom questions had more to do with the auxiliary fields, and we'll be discussing that in just a few minutes. As far as the stadium goes, we weren't making any changes outside of the stadium on the Alewife Brook side.
Yes, I think you're right. I think the question is for the second half of this. So,
all right,
I'll
we'll be
ask
there in just a couple
We'll
of
be
minutes.
getting. Yep. And this line, this plan I have back up here basically just shows you that this is a resurfacing project for the track, and we're not doing any work beyond that line that I just pointed out again. Okay, shall we move forward?
Sure, just one more thing. You've got folks, David has my name and email and phone number up. Please feel free to use that with any questions. Send me an email. You can leave a voice message at my city mailbox. I'm sorry I don't check that as frequently as I should. I'll make a point of double checking that in the days after this meeting. But I do make a point of checking it a couple of times a week. But please send me an email if you have any questions that we don't answer tonight.
Hi, could I just ask
Okay.
one more question? This is Councilor Ballantyne.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear, if you could go back on that slide that was about the materials. Yeah, maybe, or that one. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I just wanted to be clear. There was, yeah, this was the one. I just wanted to be clear. So I'm happy to hear that in the filter there wasn't any crumb rubber or minimal crumb rubber. I can't remember what the language was. Was it minimal crumb rubber?
There weren't any filters in place. So there was a drainage system around the field, but there wasn't a screen or anything at the bottom of those drains. Those drains went to a pipe which went to Alewife Brook. There was a fine grate over those drains, but nothing of the size that would catch particulate matter. That said, when we opened the drains and examined them, we didn't see any signs of any material, or no apparent signs of material going to Alewife Brook. I know that's not a definitive answer to whether anything is getting to the brook or not, but we wanted to make sure that wasn't the case going forward. So we are incorporating screens into those drains.
I'll do that.
Okay, so I just, I'm happy to hear that. I guess I'm a little bit surprised, only because I live in that area. I walk around there and I see some of the, I've seen the crumb rubber sort of floating in the Alewife Brook. But that said, I forget, how old is this now? 15 years? So the worst of it could be past. 14 years. So the worst of it could be past. And so then I guess I wouldn't be surprised maybe that those tanks or those concrete holes don't have anything. So basically what I'm saying is over time they've washed out, or the worst of it when it was new. So I just wanted to then clarify that the infill that is being proposed is not going to float. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that, and that the screens are going to, so that's my first question. And then are the screens are small enough, the mesh is small enough that the infill material will be trapped in that screen? Is that what I understand? Just want to be clear.
Yes, and we've worked with the manufacturer that makes those trench drains, the ones that were installed, to make sure that those screens are going to, first of all, fit the design exactly, so that there's that they're going to function as intended, and also that the mesh is fine enough to trap the infill that we're specifying. So yes, we've got that covered. As far as the infill floating or not, wood, you would know, is naturally buoyant, but this is the cellulose part of the wood, and when it's cut to the small particles like this, it exposes the end grain in the wood in both ends, making it hydrophilic, meaning that it literally sucks in moisture. If you put one of these grains down next to a drop of water on the table, it will pull the water into it. So as it rains and as the water builds up, if this gets into a flood stage in that area, according to local knowledge, from what we've heard, nobody's ever witnessed that field underwater. But this material has been tested so that if it, in a saturated condition, gets flooded, the infill will stay amongst the fiber. That's another reason why we're using the dual fiber, which I mentioned earlier. The slit film actually tends to bend over, and the monofilament tends to stay standing straight up. So it helps to lock the infill in place as well. I don't know if, I think that answers both of your questions.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. And then I guess as a follow-up, and this might be to Jill or to Arn, is, well, or David and Josh, what is the recommended maintenance portion? So how often should these filters be checked?
We're not actually anticipating a lot of material being moved off the field. It's going to be from getting tracked off the field by athletes, and it's onto the track, and the track pitches into the trench drain. So anything that's on the track surface will flow into the trench drain and be collected in these screens. I know Ben is very involved in all of the field maintenance in the city, and starting out, you're probably going to check these more frequently than they need to be emptied. We're anticipating that they're only going to need to be cleaned out once a year. But I'm sure that the field maintenance personnel will be monitoring it to make sure that they're functioning properly.
Yes, we've had meetings on site when we went out to the field a number of times and met with Ben and his staff, and he was, adamant about talking about the maintenance needs and having a regular maintenance schedule that they currently have and that they would continue, into the future.
And
That seems
Ben
like
has Ben has an extensive background in synthetic turf maintenance, so him and his team and our team will do a phenomenal job with that new field.
I'm sure you will. I just wanted to understand the frequency, since I don't usually talk about this kind of thing, trench drains, normally. So, and I have such a well-informed constituency. I wanted to be able to have the information. So thank you.
You're welcome. So, Aaron, I think I'll just move into the auxiliary field part of the presentation.
All right, let me
It's
just,
7:40.
here you go. Very good. Let's go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so again, we're going to be talking about the existing condition of the fields. These are natural grass, and I'll show you some pictures of that. We'll talk about the field design and how we're making improvements to those conditions, and specifically about the materials of the system that's being specified and the schedule. So, and this is a separate timeline than the stadium project, which is the one that is high priority at this point for getting completed. So the existing conditions are such that there's 2 natural grass fields here. Then on the outfield of this ball field is a soccer field that's used in the fall. And the area that is under the scope of this this field improvement project is the area that's defined by these 2 fields. So it doesn't include the courts, the pool, or the park area to the west, to the south. Again, north is to the right on this page. So there's no lighting on these fields or irrigation. They're heavily compacted soil, and given the use on the fields, because of that compaction, when it rains, the majority of the rainfall sheet flows off of these fields and goes directly into the brook. And that is something that the new design will dramatically change and improve. So these pictures are showing when you have overcompaction along with poor surface grading, you get ponding on the field, and it makes the fields unusable for extended periods of time after a rain event. This is showing the backstop area and the sidewalk along the parkway. This picture here is showing what one of the team areas looks like. One of the other things that's happened over time with these fields is the buildup of the elevation change between the infield and the surrounding lawn, and that happens gradually over time as the infill is replenished, and that will be corrected as part of this project. And then along the outfield fence, the fence that we'll show you in the plan view so you understand it a little bit more spatially, is a bunch of vegetation, both invasive and native, some native, that has encroached into the field area. So there's a fence back here behind some of this vegetation, and we're going to show you, we're actually looking at removing the invasives in this area and then establishing a buffer zone along there that won't have any of the maintenance practices that will be occurring on the field area. So you have more of a buffer between the brook and the maintained ball fields. So this plan is showing that buffer zone. The little black dots along this line right here is the existing fence line, right? And then the I think you have another plan here too, Josh, that you highlighted. So that green line in this plan, I'm going to flip back to the other one in a second, but that green line is the actual flagged wetland line. And then the dotted dashed line is the edge of the brook, edge of the stream. So, sorry, jumping ahead. Here, that zone in here that is shown in green is part of that area that used to be field that's now been grown over by that vegetation that we're going to establish as a permanent buffer zone. And that is 11 feet wide from the fence. But when you look at that 11 feet plus the distance behind the fence to the flagged wetland line, that will provide a 25-foot zone from the wetland line that will be a buffer zone. So, and that correlates to the 25-foot no disturb offset in the Wetlands Protection Act. So these other red dots that we're showing here are the locations for the new sports lighting. And that's an important aspect to this field design to improve the hours of use on the field for both the softball Little League programs as well as the soccer. And here you can see the surveyor picked up the soccer field line overlapping on the existing conditions. The other aspect of this, and this is highlighting the 100-foot buffer zone. So you can see this is what is establishing the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction within this piece of the parcel. And you can see we've also labeled the 25-foot riverfront area there as well, which is captured in the 11-foot green buffer zone that we're establishing permanently. I showed on the previous slide. What this plan is also showing is all these lines represent sand slits, and I'll explain that diagrammatically in the next slide. But these are under drains that will take the surface water that is flowing off of the field and bring it down through the root zone, and so that the root zone has the ability to absorb more of the surface water as it's flowing between when it hits the ground to where ultimately it's discharged in the brook. This cross section in the top right corner is a picture that shows how that works. This is the ground surface in green. The sand slits are cut into the root zone, and they're perpendicular to the flow of the water on the field. So as the water is flowing across the surface, it enters those sand slits. It doesn't have to travel very far before it actually gets into the drainage system. But all the way through this profile, as it's flowing through the system and going from one collector pipe or to another, which is underneath the sand slits, it's flowing past the root zone of the turf grass, and that's giving it more surface area for infiltration and absorption, so that the nutrients that are applied to the natural grass are going to be absorbed in the soil and by the plants rather than running off the surface in a rainstorm. The buffer zone that we were talking about in the previous slide is going to be seeded with a conservation seed mixture after the invasive species are removed. The native species will be allowed to continue to colonize that space. So there will be a zone that doesn't get mowed, that's 11 feet off of that fence line. And this is the species mix of that conservation seed mixture that will be establishing the natural vegetation buffer. And this is something that we've shared with DCR, and they've responded favorably to that. As far as the lighting is concerned, this is the same type of LED high performance lighting that the city of Somerville has been installing on their other recent athletic field renovation projects. Some of you may know at Winter Hill and at East Somerville Community School, those are the same technology of LED lighting, which provides very good control over directing the light onto the field surface, but preventing it from spilling off into the adjacent areas. And for the lighting on these fields, because of the size of these fields, the pole mounting height or the fixture height off of the ground will be 80 feet. And this is just showing a cross section of the post, how it sleeves over a footing. The finished grade would be above this part. The part that you see here would be underground. And this is a detail of the fixture itself, showing it in isometric and section and plan view. The LEDs are tucked a bit underneath, and this is basically a big visor that controls the light and directs it downward. And so you can see here, this is a picture of Winter Hill, and this had a 4-pole system, and just how high performance the lighting is in keeping the field lit and the surrounding neighborhood really from getting any glare from it. When you look up at these fixtures, you have to be on the field surface or directly adjacent to it to actually see the light source. And when you're on the sidewalk or on the other side of the street, you really don't even see the light source. You see the illuminated area, but not the light source. So as far as the schedule is concerned, the permitting is following the same timetable as the stadium because they're part of the same notice of intent. And the construction schedule at this point is not, we don't have a schedule for that. That's going to be going into the pipeline for funding with the city, and then going into the pecking order for projects and getting constructed. Are there any questions? I'm sure there are. Josh, maybe you can help me out. I know you were able to read them better than me under the.
Yeah, there were a few. There was one from Tori Antonio again. She might have jumped off. She had a question about increasing the lawn area around the field and whether we can remove some of the invasives bordering the auxiliary field, which I think we've addressed and explained. There is another one from Tori again regarding path rush, which is an amazing grass functioning plant. She's wondering if we can consider using that as part of the seed mix.
I don't see any reason why not. We'll certainly take that into consideration. The mixture we have here on the screen is a standard mixture from New England wetland plants, and it's used widely for conservation restoration.
Right.
But path rush is, we'll look at that species and see if that's something that is readily available and can be incorporated into the mix.
And
Yeah, I just
then
wanted to-
Michael Fager had another comment about a 50-foot buffer zone. So will it be a 50-foot buffer zone?
No, the 25-foot riverfront area is what we focused on, because the original condition was to the fence, as I pointed out, and that is a line at which the 25-foot riverfront is a line at which makes sense environmentally, but it also ensures that the sports program will continue to be able to utilize the field. Just the outfield size of this ball field, which we're not, I should have explained, we're not actually relocating the backstops on these. So these are in the same position as they are now. And being able to have the full outfield for this field, as well as have the overlapping soccer field, that 25-foot riverfront area as a permanent buffer zone, we felt was a really good point for the city to be able to commit to, while not compromising the sports program. And that, like I said, is still before the Conservation Commission. There'll be a continuance of the hearing after we've completed our review with DCR.
We should also mention that these fields will have an irrigation system.
Thank you, Josh. I'm glad you pointed that out. So the irrigation system, we have a water point of connection that comes in over behind this backstop, and that will have a piping system that distributes the water throughout all of the turf grass area. And the other thing relative to the sports lighting, as far as running conduits to them, we have that held outside of this buffer, 25-foot buffer zone as well, and going in only from the field side. So we're minimizing the disturbance so that we can maintain the native vegetation that happens to exist within that area that's going to be designated as a buffer zone.
David, that's good. Two other things I just wanted to point out that I was thinking of as you were making your presentation. You were talking about the grades of the ball field and the existing conditions, and just wanted to point out that there are grade changes there, so there will not be as dramatic a slope across the fields. So in terms, when you're thinking about the sheet runoff from the existing fields towards the brook, it will be changed. So there'll be just a more gradual slope across the field. It's not huge, but it's a notable difference, and I think it's a factor when we're talking about that sort of sheet erosion that occurs out there. I mean, the changes between the existing conditions that are there now and what we're proposing are truly, phenomenal. The conditions that are there now, Jill and Ben have done the best they can with the cards that they've been dealt out there. But the fact is, the compaction is so severe. There's no water infiltration into the field. We've got this severe, sheet runoff headed for Alewife Brook. We've got the invasives, which have encroached on the field. I think largely because when the DP, something the plant material had gone beyond the fence, and then I think as DPW was maintaining the field, they continued to allow more and more as it became established along that edge. So I think that those differences are significant. I also want to point out that one of the reasons that we like this lighting system is because it's very controllable. So it has a software control so that it is only on during permitted uses. So Jill and her staff can control the lighting with a phone app. And as far as the installation goes, the footings for these poles are essentially going into a bored hole. So if you're talking about establishing these pipe footings on the field, the disturbance is minimal. You're not going to be out there with a backhoe, digging a big pit in the field. It's going to be more of a bored hole that you drop the sleeve into, and then the new light goes into that. And I know that was a huge change over other lighting systems. So we're glad that that's the way we're going.
Arn, I'd like to ask a question. Unless there's constituents out there, I'll ask my question last.
I was just going to go through some of the comments. I don't know if you see those, David.
I can see the lighting on the Kelvin spectrum.
Yep.
And the blue or white is more disruptive to biological organisms. I'm paraphrasing there, and would you use lighting that is on the warmer spectrum? And yes, it is measured in Kelvin. So there's, this is not extremely blue on the blue spectrum. I have to double check. I don't know if you have the ability to look that up while we're talking, Josh, what the actual Kelvin of the sports lighting is. You have real installations of this same exact system at Winter Hill and at East Somerville Community School as a point of reference. And you can see that at both of those locations in conjunction with the street lighting in the area. And it's very similar to the LED street lighting that's being used. So it's not very blue, but it's also not really warm like the high pressure sodium lights from years ago, where those lights actually make it difficult for athletes to be able to play the game, because it's harder to see the ball when you have the light that's on the very warm spectrum. So we will get a specific answer to that question as far as where it falls in that. But generally speaking, somewhere around 3,000 Kelvin is like the happy medium. When you get down around 2,000, 2,500, it's very warm, or you get up around 5,000 or 6,000, it's very blue, very white, and it's certainly not on the upper end of that spectrum. And
Josh, I know we had that. I've seen that, but I don't want to say anything until you've confirmed it. I think the spectrum, our range is pretty good. But
3,000 to 4,000 is the range.
Let's get that verified.
LED. Yeah, 3,000 to 4,000 is the range that most LED lighting, street and sports lighting, falls within.
Let's confirm that. That's I believe that's where we are, but I would like to see, let's confirm that with the specs, and we'll provide that information.
So there's another
And I think
question from, oh, go ahead, David.
I was just going to say that Tori has her hand up, and we also have comments, right? Is there another comment?
Let's
Yeah,
go
there's
through the rest
a
of the
few
questions,
comments.
Josh, are you looking at the questions?
Yeah, I was looking at the questions. Brian is wondering about the small bleachers. That's another aspect of the improvement. We're improving accessibility to the dugouts for both home team and spectators. Currently, right now, as David showed in some of the existing conditions, you can see that the team benches are just sitting out in the landscape. There's no pathway to there, so they're technically inaccessible to anybody that is handicapped. So we're going to improve that system. We're providing a paved pathway to both team areas, and we're providing a new bleacher pad for spectator seating for both the Little League field and the softball, baseball field.
Yeah, there's bleachers over here, and there are bleachers here and here, right? We have them.
Correct.
Yeah. And then the pathway you can see that wraps around the backstop on both of the ball fields that ties into the existing sidewalk along the parkway.
David, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one of the things that we were talking about too is the smaller field has an outfield fence, and we had said we were going to take that down.
Correct.
Yes, thank you, Arden. So there's an existing outfield fence right here that's coming off. Yeah. You see that provides more use of an overall lawn area.
Right, there'll be a larger open running area, for recreation.
There's a question that came in from Will that says, perhaps I missed this in the presentation, but how would the project help with stormwater runoff? And would the slides be available later? The slides aren't, I'm sure, would be available, right?
Yes, absolutely, we'll post them.
And this diagram, I think, is the one that best exemplifies it. And as Arn was explaining, we are changing the surface slope, and so that there would be a consistent, even pitch. You're not going to have the steeper areas will be eliminated. Those flat spots where the water is ponding will be eliminated, so we have a consistent pitch. And as the water flows across the system, before you had sand slits, right, the existing condition, your water, the surface water, after a very a small rain event, you have a saturated soil condition and you have 100% runoff from the field. We're going to be able to capture the first 2 inches of rainfall through this system with the infiltration through the surface area that we're exposing the root zone to as it passes through this drainage system. And then it's only after those rain events that you have the 2-inch total rainfall and this could be a back-to-back storm, but at that point, then the water is going to push all the way through this collector pipe system and out into the brook. But the rainfall, when the first rain events that you have are always the ones that are picking up more of the whatever's been on the ground, whether it's pollutants or it's the fertilizers and things like that. And that's going to give you the ability, that surface area, to collect that and make it available to the plants. I should also point out that the operation and maintenance program that's already in place at these fields and will continue, they don't use, the city doesn't use any phosphorus in their fertilizer. They also use an organic-based fertilizer that is slow release on the other nutrients, particularly nitrogen. And it's frankly the best value too for the town. It's good for the environment, but also it means you're not wasting product. The material that you're putting on the fields is being taken up and being utilized by the plants. So another very important part of that program is the soil testing that goes into place. So the soil gets tested on a regular basis, including what's called a paste test, which will tell, the results will tell Ben and his team what is missing in the soil profile so that they can strategically just pinpoint the types of nutrients that need to be added rather than just putting down general purpose fertilizer regardless of what the soil already has available to the plants. So it's a very targeted maintenance program that will certainly result in, along with this infiltration drainage design, in improved water quality for the brook.
Can I ask my question now, or are there still people?
There are still a few questions
Well,
out there. Josh, do you want to?
Yeah, there's still a few. James asks, is there a natural barrier between the ball fields and Route 16 to shield the street from foul balls?
Well, these are existing fields, and we're not changing the orientation or their location.
Correct.
So as far as the fencing and the backstops, those are existing to remain, right, Josh?
Those are existing to remain, you're correct. And the existing trees, there's a mature line of trees right along the Alewife Parkway between the ball fields and the street. Those are going to remain too. And those are, like I said, large existing mature trees. So there is kind of that natural barrier to remain.
So to answer the question definitively, there is no plan to enhance or add more fencing or netting.
That is correct. There's another question from David Turin about how far down the soil needs to be removed to install this drainage system, and has there been soil testing?
Yes, there has been soil testing, both in terms of looking at the drainage as well as the horticultural needs. We've retained Pine and Swallow, who's a well-respected and well-known soil scientist, to do that evaluation for us. The good thing about this particular design is that you really don't need to do a lot of soil removal. We are going to be taking that root zone layer completely off in order to correct the grading. And at that point, we'll be screening that material and amending it. When it's replaced, and for the final field construction, that's when these sand slits are cut in. They go down, I think it's 8 to 10 inches. So basically through the root zone, and they'll intersect this subdrain system that then goes down to about 24 inches below the surface of the ground, so that your irrigation pipes can occur between the drainage pipes and the field surface. So the other systems that we looked at, we ruled out due to being cost prohibitive, and also construction logistics on the parkway would have meant a significantly greater amount of earth removal. To modify that root zone to be a high sand root zone for permeability throughout the profile would have meant a tremendous amount of trucks leaving the site and coming back to the site with a new root zone material. This is a system that allows most of the soil material that's there to remain on site.
Councilor Valentine, let's get to your question. I'd like to make sure we get that answered.
There's also Tori's hand up. I don't know if that was from before or if it's a new question.
There was a question from Tori about the bulbs in the sports field lighting, if they can be adjusted. She says people are complaining about the lights at Winter Hill.
Well, I guess I would see if there's someone from the city who knows about that particular complaint. Our office was involved with the design of that field, and we met with the community, I think at least 3 times. And there's a condominium directly adjacent to that where they had specific concerns with regard to the design. And we did actually modify it in response to their concerns, both in terms of the height of the pole and the orientation of the fixtures. And I wasn't there, but I believe Louisa was, when after the lights came on, and this gentleman happened to be in the neighborhood and expressed surprise at how effective the light lights were and was very happy with the results. So I'm not aware of a complaint being raised there. As far as the adjustability of the lights, when they're installed, they're not adjustable. So they are aimed in order to provide uniform light distribution on the field to meet the sporting requirements. And then they also have the full cutoff so that they do not cast light beyond the areas that are being illuminated for the field purposes. So their LEDs come as essentially a grid on a circuit board that's installed in a fixture. So the bulbs are not adjustable. The fixtures themselves are all precisely aimed at the factory. They come actually with a laser that points down at the field surface when the installer is installing them to make sure that they're put in the right location.
I don't mean to go on about this, but I noticed that in your field, your picture of Winter Hill, and you show just that black curtain of darkness around the edge of the field. When Josh and I were talking earlier, he pointed out that you can see the light of the window of the building nearby, and the cutoff between the edge of the field and that building is so dramatic. I just thought that was impressive. It truly is. I mean, I don't know if there was a complaint or what the complaint was, but it's truly a dramatic change. You walk from a lighted space to a dark space, and it's just I'm really thrilled with this system.
Yeah, the lights at Capuano were the latest technology when that field was constructed, but those are metal halide lights, and they also had very good light control, but these are far superior to those. And new fields being installed, this is the best you can get for sports light control.
That's correct. When we did the Capuano field, LED lights were not available at that time, so we had the best system that was available at that time. I think we're caught up with questions.
Can I chime in, Arm?
Yes, please. Please do, yes.
So I want to say I'm really excited about this particular project. Hearing about work to get rid of those invasive species is great, because I was actually having a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Representative Christine Barber on what we can do to work with DCR to try to address the problem on the Somerville side, since Arlington was doing a pretty good job on their side to get rid of the invasive species. So I'm really excited about this project. One thing that I brought up is there's a lot going on in Ward 7. So I want to bring this up because I'm not saying that it hasn't been addressed, but I just want to make sure that all departments are talking to one another, consultants and so forth. So flooding is a problem in this area on Alewife Brook Parkway. It's one of the 2 worst flood areas in the city. I've spent a tremendous amount of time with the Rich Raish, who's the Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management for the city, to look at this area. Across the street, where the 3-story brick buildings are, that's a 216 unit housing complex. It's going to increase to a 10-story housing complex with about 600 units. So I always say at every single meeting, flooding, flooding, flooding. I'm really concerned about it. I want to know that the project across the street is talking to the project in the fields. I know Louisa has heard me say this a number of times, so I just want to make sure that publicly we understand it. I live in this neighborhood, so I walk in that field, and when it rains, it's a sponge. When I talked to Rich Raish, who's the Director of Infrastructure Management, he pulled all the old drawings from the late 1800s to see where the sewage pipes and the waste pipes come out of Powder House and go into the brook. So we were looking at that, and in the comment he said that the water table must be really high here because the waste pipe is so high. So my question, where I'm like so concerned about flooding, and is that you all are aware of all these adjacent projects that are going on, that there's flooding on Alewife Brook Parkway. It's an old system. It's a state road. So we don't have that much control on it, where we have this new ball field and we have the 600 unit housing complex that's going to be 10 stories going in across the street. And, you know, I just want confirmation that the field won't flood. That the field won't be the spongy, flood. Anything can happen if you have this incredible storm. But I mean that it does not become this spongy area. It rains, it's sponge. It rains, I get social media blows up, phone calls, because there's always flooding on this area. So that's the backdrop. That's the context in which I work with my constituents over here and try to draw it. So I just want to understand in a better way that that the investment that we're putting in these fields will be usable fields. I hate to ask you this, Jill, in a rain. I mean, I know there's a limit of whether the rain, but that it's not going to be mush and it's not going to be a sponge when it rains.
Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of rain. I think, Ben and his team
Right,
kind of monitor
yes.
that, and but if it's definitely, too much moisture, we'll have to close the field. But, we've seen with some better drainage in our newer fields that there's less closing due to extreme rain events. But, it's definitely better than, it will be definitely better than it is now for sure.
And Jill, I can provide some very specific answers to these questions as well. So a natural grass field in a floodplain will get wet when it rains. And that's this magenta line that's here is elevation 13, and that is the floodplain there according to the FEMA maps. I don't know if anybody has ever witnessed the field being completely underwater to that point, but that is the theoretical line that could have, the 100-year storm could have standing water. So what is also very important to understand in terms of flood mitigation is that because this is a floodplain, we need to make sure that the regrading that we're doing is not making the problem worse. What that means is that every contour that we're changing, these lines here represent a constant elevation. This dashed line right here is elevation 12, I think. And this right here is the new elevation 12. And by moving it back from the brook, we're actually lowering the elevation slightly there. And what that means is that we're technically creating a little bit more flood storage. We can't increase it. We can't move that line towards the brook, because what we're doing is we're decreasing flood storage, and we're affecting, potentially adversely affecting downstream properties. So we're doing work within a floodplain. This is fully compliant. We've done the engineering, or niche engineering, our civil engineer has done the calculations that show every contour that we've modified going through the site is actually having a net increase in the amount of flood storage capacity. So that's very important for downstream properties. For players in the field, what I hear you saying, in terms of the usability of it, in a heavy rain, the field should be closed in order to protect the turf grass between those sand slits, but it can be reopened much sooner. Won't be closed for a day or 2 or 3, depending upon. Right now, when it rains, that field's going to be closed for an extended period of time. This system will allow the field to return to a playable condition much faster than the current conditions.
Okay.
I want to reiterate. I just want to reiterate that your work with niche engineering, the modeling studies show that there is a decrease in runoff to Alewife Brook. We have those studies and we have those numbers.
Okay. I mean, just to answer David's question, yes, I have seen standing water close to the Alewife Brook. I would say it was bad about, at various times, say 4 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, there was some really high flooding, and the brook, which is now at a drought, is as high as, you could see it, you know, if you looked at profile of the brook and the water, that it was almost to the top of the edge of the embankment, so to speak. So I'm curious, when there are high waters in the brook, this idea that this design is allowing for the water to drain towards the brook, what happens in that scenario? Does it just sort of stay still, or does it, you know, what happens? And
Yeah,
also
so-
with the
so when-
assumption it has a really high water table in the field, or maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong in that.
No, that's correct.
No, water table being high there is it comes with the territory and a floodplain next to a river. So that is a very true statement. And that's why we have this shallow base drainage system, because what it's doing is it's effectively dewatering the root zone without having to worry about the water table beneath it. But in a flood stage, and let me just point out, this magenta line back here that wraps around the pitcher's mound here follows the base path, basically. If that were ever achieved with flood stage, this would appear as an island, that this entire
Right.
field area would be
Exactly.
underwater. And I don't, yeah, so that is the theoretical maximum flood stage. But if on regular flooding events, it's really just coming into this buffer zone, that's not going to have a significant impact in terms of the playability of the field. The drainage pipes that go down to that elevation, yes, the water during that flood stage would stay still in those pipes until it dropped below the outlet point, at which point it would start to flow again. So it depends on how long the flood remains at that flood stage.
Okay, thank you. And just a final question, and hopefully constituents have more questions, is I've been curious. I have never seen the stadium flood myself. When the water tables were so high they was flooding in the grass fields and along the river. Does that mean that the stadium is at a higher elevation than the grass fields? Just out of curiosity.
It is slightly higher, but the flood elevation line here, you can see the cyan line continues along. And this is mapped on a regional level, so you can see it doesn't really follow the exact line of the front of the slope in front of the bleachers. But yeah, this is the FEMA flood line that's jurisdictional as far as making sure that we don't change the flood storage capacity between the brook and that line.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
Everyone, I
welcome.
want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Wanted to be sure to say thank you to everyone who took time to come to the meeting. Just to repeat myself, please, send any questions or emails to me. If you have them, we'll get you an answer in a day or two. This process is continuing to move forward. As I said in the beginning of the meeting, these fields are owned by the state, by the DCR. And as a part of this review process, the DCR needs to review these plans as well before we go to the Conservation Commission. And so that will be our next step. The DCR has an extensive internal green docket review process where their wetland specialists and their engineers take a look at the plans. We've already received, to the best of my knowledge, we've had frequent communication with DCR, and I believe we have all of their questions at this point and have answered them all. But we'll certainly follow up with them, and then when we go to the Conservation Commission to get their approval of the plans, we'll be able to incorporate DCR's questions there as well. And we'll get this presentation up on the city website. So if you go to the city website, give me a couple of days, but if you go to the city website and you use the search bar, you should be able to find the presentation. I'm sorry, Councilor Ballantyne, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you. Are you stopping the meeting now?
I wanted to make sure that I guess we're getting there, yes. I'm not necessarily stopping the meeting. If people have additional questions, let's make sure we address them. But I want to be careful that, of everyone's time.
Aaron, I just wanted you to make sure that to recognize that Will Ball did, Councilor Ball didn't join the meeting.
Yes, we did. And Will had asked a question earlier that we had answered. So thank you, Councilor Mba. Appreciate your attendance. Thank you very much. I know that these are issues that concern you as well. I know from several city council meetings that you have a special place in your heart for the environmental issues. Anybody else? I'm sorry, I'm scanning the questions and the chat, and I'm not seeing anything, so I just want to be sure. Does anybody else see anything?
So I'm a little unclear. Are the question marks that we're viewing here people who have raised hands?
I have not seen, the only hand that I
Okay.
saw raised was Tori's hand. And
Okay.
I don't think she's in the meeting anymore because she said she had to
She
jump
is.
off.
She is.
Okay, good. So, Tori, I don't think we don't have any more questions from you. If you have a question, again, give me a call, send me a note, and we'll talk about it.
When I look at those question marks in the attendees list and you hover over it, it says go to questions pane, click on it and it opens up the questions that we see in the box below anyway, and it just in a larger window, and we've answered all of those questions, I think.
Very good. Jill, I wanted to make sure that, do you have any questions or do you have any closing
No, I just want
thoughts?
to thank everyone, especially Councilor Valentine, for just the dedication with this and being patient with us as we get through this end result. And I look forward to the final project. And I think Warren Larson has done a phenomenal job in putting this together. And I'm looking forward to, like I said, the end outcome with this. But most importantly, I'm looking forward to what this is going to provide for our community and our kids and our high schoolers. This is so deserving to them, and they deserve a safe place to play that will now include a natural green space and also a synthetic turf surface that with the rock fill. So it's a win-win overall.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, David, Josh, Arn, Jill. Yeah, it is very exciting. It is very exciting. Just one thing, I'm not sure that I saw where the soccer field was going to go. I just know it's going to be in the outfield. So that would be, I think, if maybe I didn't see it properly, but maybe that would be exciting, I'm sure, for the soccer folks to be able to see the actual outline or a dotted line or on the, yeah.
I think what we can do, Josh, is just make that visible on the slide before we can send an update to Arn, just so that's visible here.
Sure. I can, if you want, I can share a screen and show it.
Okay. I guess Arn would have to let you do that, or do I let you?
No, I think you've got control right now.
I can add it to this before we send the slide deck through. We can do that.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Good work. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Please don't hesitate to give me a call or send me a note if you have any questions. All right.
Okay.
So
Great.
thank you, everyone. I'm going to close the meeting. Have a great night. Take care.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.